The Galactic Military Academy on Kepler Station had seen many species pass through its halls over the past 3 centuries. Tall, scaled Vorthak warriors with their razor-sharp claws, insectoid Zephyrians whose chitinous armor could deflect plasma bolts, the massive, rock-skinned Goliaths, whose mere presence made the station's deck plating groan. But never, in all that time, had they admitted a human. Captain Sarah Chen stood at attention in the Academy's central courtyard, her slight frame dwarfed by the towering alien cadets around her. At 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighing barely 140 pounds, she looked like a child among giants. The other species whispered among themselves in their various languages, but the universal translator made their doubts crystal clear. How did such a fragile creature pass the entrance examinations? Clicked a Zephyrian, its compound eyes glittering with amusement. Perhaps the humans have excellent academic scores to compensate for their obvious physical limitations. Rumbled a Goliath, his voice like grinding stones. Sarah kept her expression neutral, though her jaw tightened slightly. She had heard similar comments throughout the 3-month journey to Kepler Station. The human delegation that had negotiated Earth's entry into the Galactic Federation had warned her this would happen. Humans were newcomers, untested in the greater galaxy's conflicts. Most species viewed them as curiosities at best, potential liabilities at worst. Drill instructor Kextar, a formidable Vorthak with emerald scales and eyes like molten gold, emerged from the Academy's main building. His presence immediately silenced the murmuring crowd of cadets. Kextar had trained some of the galaxy's finest warriors over his 200-year career. His reputation was legendary, his methods unforgiving. Today marks the beginning of your advanced combat training, Kextar announced, his voice carrying across the courtyard without need for amplification. For the next 6 months, you will be tested in every conceivable combat scenario. Those who prove unworthy will be returned to their homeworlds in shame. Those who excel may one day stand among the Federation's elite guard. His golden gaze swept across the assembled cadets before settling on Sarah. However, before we begin formal training, we have a unique opportunity. As you all know, we have been joined by the first human cadet in our Academy's history. Many of you have expressed concerns about the combat readiness of this species. Sarah felt the weight of hundreds of alien eyes upon her. Some looked curious, others skeptical, and a few openly hostile. The Vorthak predator cadets in particular seemed to regard her with barely concealed disdain. They were the Academy's elite, descendants of a warrior race that had conquered dozens of worlds before joining the Federation. Their combat prowess was unquestioned. Therefore, Kextar continued, we will conduct a demonstration. Cadet Chen will face 12 volunteers in a simulated combat exercise. The rules are simple. All participants will use standard non-lethal training equipment. The exercise ends when one side achieves complete incapacitation of their opponents. A ripple of excitement and disbelief ran through the crowd. 12 against 1 was considered overwhelming odds under any circumstances, but pitting a single human against a dozen experienced fighters seemed less like a demonstration and more like an execution. 12 Vorthak predator cadets stepped forward, their movements fluid and predatory. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were the cream of their species' military academies, each one capable of taking on multiple opponents in single combat. Their leader, a particularly large male named Vex High, stood nearly 8 feet tall with muscles that rippled beneath his scales. This is absurd, muttered Cadet Zormel, a Goliath whose rocky hide bore the scars of numerous battles. They're going to slaughter her. Even some of the instructors looked uncomfortable. Humans were known for their intelligence and adaptability, but this seemed like sending a laboratory technician against a pack of hunting beasts. The 12 Vorthak selected their weapons from the training arsenal: stun batons, shock nets, and energy shields. Each weapon was designed to incapacitate rather than kill, but in the hands of skilled Vorthak warriors, they could still inflict considerable pain and injury. Sarah approached the weapon rack with measured steps. Her options were limited. Most of the equipment was sized for larger species. She bypassed the heavy shock nets and energy shields, finally selecting a single item: a standard stun baton, roughly 2 feet long with a non-lethal energy field at one end. The crowd's murmur grew louder. A stun baton against 12 fully armed opponents? This wasn't a combat demonstration. It was a massacre waiting to happen. Cadet Chen, Kextar called out, his voice carrying a note of genuine concern. "You may select additional equipment. This is not meant to be a suicide mission." Sarah hefted the baton, testing its weight and balance. It was heavier than she preferred, designed for species with greater natural strength, but it would have to do. "This is sufficient, sir." The Vorthak predators exchanged glances that clearly communicated their thoughts. The human was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, probably the latter. The combat arena was a circular space about 50 meters in diameter, surrounded by an energy barrier to contain the action and protect the spectators. As the participants took their positions, betting pools began forming among the watching cadets. The odds were overwhelmingly against Sarah, with most wagers focusing on how quickly she would fall, rather than whether she could win. Kextar raised his hand. "Combatants ready?" The 12 Vorthak spread out in a loose circle around Sarah, cutting off all escape routes. Their formation was textbook perfect, designed to overwhelm a single opponent through coordinated attacks from multiple angles. Sarah stood in the center, her baton held loosely at her side. Her posture appeared relaxed, almost casual, but her dark eyes tracked every movement of her opponents. She had studied Vorthak combat techniques extensively during her journey to the academy. Fast, aggressive, and overwhelming, they relied on their natural speed and strength to dominate opponents before they could mount an effective defense. Begin. What happened next would be talked about in the academy's halls for decades to come. The Vorthak attacked with perfect coordination, moving as a single predatory unit. 3 came from her front, 2 from each flank, and 5 from behind. A formation designed to ensure that no matter which direction she turned, she would be vulnerable to attack from multiple directions. Sarah didn't turn. She didn't even move for the first crucial second as 12 warriors closed the distance at frightening speed. To the watching crowd, she appeared frozen by fear or shock. Then she exploded into motion. Sarah's first step was lateral, not backward as her opponents expected. She slid between 2 converging attackers, her baton coming up in a lightning-fast arc that caught the first Vorthak across the side of his head. The stun field activated on contact, sending him crashing to the ground in convulsions. Before the second attacker could adjust his trajectory, Sarah had pivoted on her left foot, bringing the baton around in a horizontal sweep that caught him in the solar plexus. Another burst of electrical energy, another Vorthak down. 2 seconds had passed. 10 opponents remained. The remaining Vorthak tried to close ranks, but Sarah was already moving again. She dropped to one knee as a shock net sailed over her head, then rolled forward between the legs of a charging opponent. Her baton jabbed upward, connecting with a sensitive nerve cluster at the base of his spine. The massive warrior toppled like a felled tree. "Impossible," breathed an instructor. "Humans don't move that fast." But Sarah wasn't just moving fast. She was moving efficiently. Every step was calculated, every strike precisely placed. While the Vorthak relied on brute force and overwhelming aggression, she used their own momentum against them. When they charged, she sidestepped and struck. When they swung their weapons, she ducked under and countered. When they tried to surround her, she broke their formation by targeting the weakest link. A Vorthak cadet swung his stun baton in a wide arc, confident that his superior reach would keep the human at bay. Sarah stepped inside his guard, grabbed his wrist, and used her leverage to redirect his own weapon into his teammate's chest. Both warriors went down in a tangle of limbs and electrical discharge. 5 down, 7 to go. The remaining Vorthak began to hesitate, their perfect coordination breaking down as doubt crept into their movements. This wasn't supposed to happen. Humans were weak, slow, fragile creatures. Yet somehow this single female was systematically dismantling their entire team with nothing more than a training baton. Vex High, the team leader, roared a command in the Vorthak tongue. His remaining warriors spread out wider, trying to force Sarah to cover more ground. It was a sound tactical decision, but it also meant they couldn't support each other as effectively. Sarah recognized the change in strategy immediately. Rather than wait for them to attack, she went on the offensive. She sprinted toward the nearest Vorthak, feinted left, then dove right as he swung his weapon where she had been a split second before. Her baton found the nerve cluster behind his knee, and he collapsed with a shriek of pain. 6 down, 6 to go. The watching crowd had fallen completely silent. This wasn't just an upset. It was a complete reversal of everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. The small, fragile-looking creature in the arena was moving like a force of nature. striking with surgical precision and disappearing before her opponents could retaliate. Two Vorthak attacked simultaneously from opposite sides, thinking to catch her in a pincer movement. Sarah leaped straight up, an impossible vertical jump that carried her nearly 6 feet off the ground. Both attackers crashed into each other while she came down on one's shoulders, drove her baton into his neck, and used him as a springboard to launch herself at his confused partner. 8 down, 4 to go. Vex High and his 3 remaining warriors had backed against the arena's edge, their predatory confidence replaced by something approaching terror. They had never seen anything like this. The human moved like liquid death, flowing around their attacks as if she could see them coming before they were even launched. "How is this possible?" Vex High demanded, his voice cracking with strain. Sarah paused for a moment, her breathing barely elevated despite the intense physical exertion. "You fight like predators," she said simply. "I fight like a survivor." The distinction was crucial. Predators were used to overwhelming their prey through superior force and intimidation. Survivors fought dirty, used every advantage available, and never stopped adapting. When your species had clawed its way up from the bottom of the food chain on a death world, you learned very different lessons about combat. Vex High raised his weapon with shaking hands. "You're just one small human. We are Vorthak." "Yes," Sarah agreed. "You are." Then she moved. The final 4 Vorthak attacked together in desperation, abandoning all pretense of strategy. Sarah flowed between them like smoke, her baton a blur of precisely targeted strikes, a tap to a pressure point here, a jab to a nerve cluster there, and within seconds all 4 warriors were writhing on the ground, their nervous systems overloaded by the stun weapon's discharge. 12 Vorthak Predator Cadets, 12 of the galaxy's finest young warriors, all of them incapacitated by a single human wielding nothing but a non-lethal training baton. The silence in the arena stretched on for nearly a full minute. No one seemed capable of processing what they had just witnessed. Finally, Kextar's voice cut through the stunned quiet. "Exercise complete. Victory, Cadet Chen." The words seemed to break whatever spell had held the crowd frozen. Suddenly, everyone was talking at once, voices raised in dozens of different languages as cadets and instructors tried to make sense of what they had seen. Some demanded to review the security recordings, convinced they had missed some crucial detail. Others called for medical scans, certain the human must have been using some form of enhancement or artificial augmentation. Sarah deactivated her baton and walked calmly off the arena floor. Her expression remained neutral, professional. But there was something in her dark eyes that made several nearby cadets step back involuntarily. It was the look of someone who had just made a point and wanted to be very sure it was understood. As the medical team rushed onto the field to tend to the unconscious Vorthak warriors, whispered conversations spread through the crowd like wildfire. The humans weren't just another weak species seeking protection under the Federation's banner. They were something else entirely. Something that 12 trained predators couldn't handle. Something that had just announced its presence to the galaxy in the most direct way possible. The medical bay of Kepler Station had never seen anything quite like it. 12 Vorthak cadets lay on examination tables, their pride wounded far more severely than their bodies. The stun baton's effects were wearing off, leaving them with nothing more than mild headaches and bruised egos. Dr. Yelnara, the station's chief medical officer, finished her scans with a puzzled expression on her amphibian features. "Physically, they're all fine," she announced to the gathering of Academy instructors. "Minor neural disruption from the stun weapons, but nothing that won't fade completely within the hour. However, I'm detecting elevated stress hormones consistent with severe psychological trauma." Commander Thexlar, the Academy's Goliath director, rumbled his disapproval. "Psychological trauma? From a training exercise?" "Not from the exercise itself, Doctor," Yelnara clarified. "From having their fundamental understanding of reality challenged. These cadets genuinely believed they were members of a superior warrior species. Today, a creature they viewed as prey systematically dismantled that belief." In a private conference room 3 levels above the medical bay, the Academy's senior staff struggled to process what they had witnessed. Holographic replays of the combat exercise played on repeat, showing Sarah's impossible performance from multiple angles. Frame-by-frame analysis only made it more mystifying. "Run the speed calculations again," demanded Professor Kixtara, the Academy's combat theory instructor. Her insectoid features twitched with agitation as data scrolled across her tablet. Human baseline musculature should not permit those reaction times. Captain Rexhole, a veteran Vorthak warrior who served as the Academy's tactical instructor, shook his scarred head. It wasn't just speed. I've reviewed the footage 17 times. She anticipated every attack before it happened. It's as if she could read their minds. Perhaps she could, suggested Dr. Mordain, the station's xenobiologist. We know very little about human neurology. They could have latent telepathic abilities. The humans submitted complete biological profiles during their Federation application, Kixtara countered. No mention of psionic capabilities. Their brain structure appears entirely unremarkable by galactic standards. Commander Thexlar's massive fist slammed onto the conference table, causing several smaller instructors to jump. Then how do we explain what happened? 12 trained Vorthak warriors don't simply lose to a single opponent wielding basic equipment. It's impossible. Clearly, it's not impossible, Dr. Mordain observed quietly. Perhaps our assumptions about humans are incorrect. Meanwhile, in her assigned quarters, Sarah Chen sat cross-legged on her sleeping mat, reviewing tactical manuals on her tablet. She had changed out of her combat gear and into standard academy fatigues, looking once again like the unassuming academic most cadets had assumed her to be. The door chimed, and she granted entry without looking up from her reading. Cadet Vex's High entered hesitantly, his emerald scales darker than usual, a sign of shame among his species. The Vorthak warrior who had led the assault against her now moved like a defeated predator. His shoulders hunched and eyes downcast. I came to apologize, he said in accented standard, and to ask a question. Sarah set down her tablet and studied him carefully. You don't need to apologize for fighting. That's what we were ordered to do. Not for fighting, Vexhai clarified. For underestimating you. For believing the whispers that humans were weak and unworthy of this academy. I was wrong. What's your question? Vexhai struggled for a moment, his predatory instincts warring with his curiosity. How did you know? Every move we made, every attack we planned, you countered it before we even began. Are humans telepathic? Sarah almost smiled at that. No, we're not telepathic. We're just very good at pattern recognition. Pattern recognition? Your species has been perfecting the same hunting techniques for thousands of years. Pack coordination, overwhelming force, intimidation tactics, they work very well against prey animals and most other species. But humans have been dealing with pack hunters since we lived in caves. She stood and moved to her quarter's small viewport, looking out at the stars. Do you know what Earth is like? Vexhai, the Vorthak cadet, shook his head. It's a death world. Not in the dramatic sense of poison atmospheres or crushing gravity, but in terms of biological diversity and competition. Every niche is filled by something trying to kill and eat something else. Humans evolved in the middle of that chaos. Neither the strongest, nor the fastest, nor the most heavily armed. Sarah turned back to face him. So we learned to think. We learned to observe. We learned to turn our enemies' strengths against them. When the pack hunters came for us, we studied their patterns until we could predict their moves. When the ambush predators struck, we learned to spot the signs before they attacked. When the venomous creatures threatened us, we developed resistances or avoided them entirely. But you moved so fast, Vexhai protested. Faster than human physiology should allow. Adrenaline, Sarah explained simply. Humans produce stress hormones that can temporarily triple our strength and reaction speed. Most species have similar responses, but yours are designed for short bursts of maximum aggression. Ours are designed for extended survival situations where failure means death. The Vorthak cadet absorbed this information in silence. Finally, he asked, is every human capable of what you did today? Sarah considered the question carefully. Not exactly. I've had specialized training that most humans don't receive. But the basic capabilities, the pattern recognition, the adaptability, the determination to survive against overwhelming odds? Yes, those are universal human traits. What kind of specialized training? I was a combat instructor for the Earth Defense Force before joining the Academy. My job was to teach human soldiers how to fight alien enemies we'd never encountered before. The Federation provided us with extensive databases of various species' combat doctrines, physical capabilities, and psychological profiles. Vexhi's eyes widened. You've been studying us since before humanity joined the Federation? We've been studying everyone, Sarah confirmed. Humans don't like surprises, especially unpleasant ones. When we learned we weren't alone in the galaxy, our first priority was understanding what we might be facing. The implications of this statement hung in the air between them. The Federation's member species had assumed that humans were newcomers, naive and unprepared for galactic realities. Instead, they had been preparing for decades, studying their potential allies and enemies with the systematic thoroughness of a species that had learned to survive by understanding threats before encountering them. 3 hours later, an emergency session of the Academy's evaluation board convened in the station's secure briefing room. Representatives from a dozen different species crowded around the circular table, their expressions ranging from concerned to openly hostile. "This changes everything," declared Ambassador Quintel, a crystalline being whose race served as the Federation's diplomatic corps. "If humans possess these capabilities, why wasn't it disclosed during their admission negotiations?" "Perhaps because we never asked," suggested Captain Mortex, a Zephyrian whose compound eyes glittered with unease. "Our evaluation protocols focus on technological development and cultural compatibility. We never tested individual combat capabilities. That's because no species has ever demonstrated such disparity between apparent physical limitations and actual performance," rumbled General Koldash, a Goliath military leader. "It's unprecedented." Ambassador Yelkar, representing the Vorthok government, leaned forward aggressively. "Are we certain this human wasn't augmented? Cybernetic enhancements, genetic modifications, chemical stimulants?" "All tests came back negative," Dr. Yelnara reported. "Baseline human physiology in every measurable parameter. If anything, she's slightly smaller and lighter than the human average." "Then how do we explain her performance?" Dr. Mordain activated a holographic display showing comparative evolutionary data. "I've been researching human origins since this afternoon. Their homeworld classification as a death world appears to be conservative. Earth supports more predatory species per square kilometer than any other inhabited planet on record." The display showed a three-dimensional map of Earth's continents, color-coded to indicate the density of dangerous life forms. Nearly every landmass glowed deep red. The average Earth ecosystem contains 43 species capable of killing an adult human. Dr. Mordain continued. "For comparison, my homeworld has 7. Vorthok Prime has 12. The galactic average is 6, but humans are clearly not the dominant predators on their world," Captain Mortex observed. "How did they survive to develop intelligence?" "By becoming something else entirely," Dr. Mordain replied. "Not predators or prey, but persistence hunters. They didn't try to outmuscle or outspeed their enemies. They simply outlasted them." More data appeared on the holographic display. Comparative endurance statistics, thermoregulation efficiency, caloric conversion rates. In every category related to sustained physical activity, humans ranked near the top of all known species. "Humans can literally run their prey to death," Dr. Mordain explained. "They maintain pursuit for hours, sometimes days, until their target collapses from exhaustion. No other species we've encountered evolved this hunting strategy, and the pattern recognition ability she demonstrated, a natural consequence of their survival strategy. Persistence hunters must be able to track their prey across vast distances and varied terrain. They learn to read subtle environmental cues, predict animal behavior, and adapt their tactics in real time. Over millions of years, these skills became hardwired into their neural structure." The room fell silent as the assembled representatives absorbed this information. They had all assumed that intelligence was the great equalizer among species, that once a race developed technology, physical capabilities became irrelevant. The idea that one species might retain significant evolutionary advantages in an age of energy weapons and spacecraft was deeply unsettling. "What does this mean for the Federation?" Ambassador Quintel asked quietly. General Koldash was the first to voice what they were all thinking. "It means we may have underestimated what humanity brings to our alliance. Significantly. Or it means we need to reevaluate whether their inclusion was wise," Ambassador Yelkar countered. "A species with these capabilities could pose a threat to galactic stability." "Could they?" Dr. Mordain challenged. "Everything we've observed suggests humans prefer cooperation to conquest. Their own history shows a clear trend toward reducing conflict, as their technology advanced. Their own history also shows they're exceptionally good at warfare when forced into it, General Koldash pointed out grimly. If humans are natural-born warriors disguised as peaceful academics, what happens when they decide diplomacy has failed? The question hung unanswered in the air. Outside the conference room's viewports, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the concerns of the tiny beings debating in their shadow. Somewhere among those distant suns lay Earth, the blue-green death world that had forged humanity in the crucible of constant danger. And somewhere else among those same stars, other species were beginning to ask the same questions that now troubled the Academy's leadership. Just what had the galaxy gotten itself into by accepting humans as equals? Back in her quarters, Sarah continued reading her tactical manuals, occasionally making notes in the margins. She was aware of the debates raging throughout the station, the frantic communications being sent to homeworlds across the Federation, the emergency sessions being convened by leaders who suddenly realized they might not understand their newest allies as well as they had thought. None of it concerned her particularly. She had a mission to complete: graduate from the Academy with honors, prove that humans could serve alongside any species in the galaxy, and return to Earth with the knowledge needed to train the next generation of human officers. The fact that her demonstration had revealed more about human capabilities than the Federation was comfortable knowing was simply an unavoidable consequence of completing her mission effectively. After all, humans were very good at completing missions, especially when the alternatives were unacceptable. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, and undoubtedly new attempts by various species to understand what they were dealing with. Sarah looked forward to it. Competition had always brought out the best in her species, and the galaxy was about to learn just how competitive humans could be when they set their minds to it. 6 months had passed since what the cadets had begun calling the Baton incident, and Kepler Station buzzed with an energy that had nothing to do with its fusion reactors. The Galactic Military Academy's graduation ceremony was 3 days away, and for the first time in its history, every member species had sent high-ranking officials to attend. They weren't coming to celebrate their own graduates. They were coming to see what else the human might do. Sarah Chen had become something of a legend during her time at the Academy. Every training exercise, every simulation, every test had been scrutinized by instructors looking for the limits of human capability. They found very few. In void combat training, she adapted to zero gravity faster than species that had evolved in space. In survival exercises, she outlasted beings twice her size who required half as much sustenance. In tactical planning, she consistently found solutions that had escaped military minds with centuries of experience. The other cadets had initially reacted with a mixture of awe and resentment. How could they compete against someone whose species had apparently evolved for warfare? But as the months passed, many began to appreciate what Sarah represented. Proof that power came in forms they had never imagined. Vexhai had become an unlikely friend, often seeking her advice on combat techniques and tactical theory. Through their conversations, word spread among the Vorthok cadets about human military philosophy. Instead of focusing purely on individual prowess, humans emphasized adaptability, teamwork, and what they called force multiplication, using intelligence and cooperation to achieve effects far beyond what their physical capabilities should have allowed. The concept had proven revolutionary. Mixed species training units that included human tactical advisors consistently outperformed traditional formations. The Academy's combat simulation scores had reached record highs as cadets learned to think like humans, always adapting, always looking for advantages their enemies wouldn't expect. But not everyone was pleased with these developments. In the Academy's administrative section, a tense meeting was taking place between station personnel and a delegation of concerned species representatives. Ambassador Yelkar led the group, his scaled features set in grim lines as he reviewed the data on his personal tablet. "These performance metrics are impossible," he declared. "No single species should dominate in every category of military training. The human doesn't dominate in every category," Captain Rex Hole corrected. "She ranks in the top 10% for most skills, and top 1% for tactical analysis and adaptive combat. That's exceptional, but not impossible." "What's impossible," rumbled General Koldash, "is that this represents baseline human capability. If this individual is average for her species, then humans have been deliberately concealing their true nature from the Federation." Commander Thexlar's rocky features showed deep concern. I've been in contact with human military leadership on Earth. According to their records, Captain Chen ranks in the 95th percentile for combat effectiveness among their special forces personnel. The implications hit the assembled officials like a physical blow. If Sarah represented the top 5% of human military capability, what did that say about the species as a whole? And what did it say about the humans who ranked even higher than she did? We need to discuss this directly with the human leadership, Ambassador Quintel stated. The Federation Council is demanding answers about what we're really dealing with. 3 levels below, in the Academy's Combat Training Center, Sarah was conducting what had become a daily ritual, sparring matches with volunteers from various species. Today's opponent was Cadet Morketh, a Goliath whose rock-hard skin made him nearly invulnerable to most conventional weapons. At 7 feet tall and weighing over 400 pounds, he represented one of the most challenging opponents the Academy could provide. The match lasted exactly 43 seconds. Sarah's strategy was simple. Since she couldn't damage her opponent directly, she would use his own mass against him. A series of precise strikes to pressure points disrupted his balance, followed by a leverage throw that sent him crashing to the mat with enough force to crack the reinforced flooring. The impact stunned him just long enough for Sarah to apply a submission hold that even his massive strength couldn't break. "Yield," Morketh gasped, tapping the mat frantically. As Sarah released him and helped him to his feet, she noticed the crowd of observers had grown unusually large. Academy instructors, visiting dignitaries, and cadets from every species filled the observation galleries. All of them watched her with expressions she had learned to recognize. The look of people trying to solve an impossible puzzle. "Thank you for the match," she told Morketh formally. "Your defensive techniques have improved significantly." The Goliath cadet rubbed his aching joints ruefully. "My techniques improve because I have no choice. You find new ways to defeat me every time we spar." This was true. Sarah never used the same strategy twice against the same opponent, forcing them to constantly adapt and evolve their own fighting styles. It was, she had explained to the instructors, standard human training doctrine. Never let your enemies become comfortable with your methods. As she left the training center, Sarah was intercepted by drill instructor Kextar. The Vorthak's golden eyes held a mixture of respect and something that might have been concern. "Captain Chen, report to Conference Room Alpha immediately. There are individuals who wish to speak with you." Sarah nodded and followed him through the station's corridors. As they walked, Kextar spoke quietly. "Whatever they ask you, remember that your performance here has exceeded every expectation. You have brought honor to your species and to this academy." The conference room held more high-ranking officials than Sarah had ever seen in one place. Representatives from every major Federation species sat around the circular table, their body language tense with barely contained anxiety. At the head of the table sat Admiral Vexthane, Supreme Commander of Federation military forces, his ancient Vorthak features scarred by decades of warfare. "Captain Chen," the Admiral began without preamble, "we need to discuss your species' capabilities and intentions." Sarah took the single empty chair at the table's center, noting how it positioned her as the focus of every gaze in the room. Standard interrogation tactics: isolate the subject, make them feel outnumbered and vulnerable. She had taught similar techniques to human intelligence officers. "What specifically would you like to discuss, sir?" "We want to know if you represent typical human capability," Admiral Vexthane stated bluntly. "Your performance here suggests that humans have been deliberately understating their military potential." "I represent human military potential when properly trained and motivated," Sarah replied carefully. "As do the military representatives of every species in this room, I assume." Ambassador Yelkar leaned forward aggressively. "Don't parse words with us, human. Are you, or are you not, an exceptional individual among your kind?" "That depends on your definition of exceptional," Sarah responded. "In terms of raw physical capability, I'm slightly above human average. In terms of training and experience, I'm in the upper tier of human military personnel. In terms of performance under pressure." She paused, considering. "I'm exactly what you should expect from a human who was selected to represent our species at this academy." "You're saying Earth deliberately sent their best warrior?" General Koldash rumbled. "Earth sent someone who could complete the mission successfully," Sarah clarified. "Just as I assume your governments did." The distinction was subtle but important. She wasn't claiming to be humanity's greatest warrior. She was acknowledging that she had been chosen specifically because her capabilities matched the requirements of the assignment. Dr. Mordain activated a holographic display showing comparative data from across the Federation. Captain, these statistics suggest that humans consistently outperform other species in adaptive learning, pattern recognition, and what our military analysts call tactical creativity. Is this accurate? Sarah studied the data for several minutes before responding. Your methodology appears sound, though I'd note that these measurements focus on areas where humans naturally excel. If you tested maximum lifting strength or regenerative healing rates, the results would be different. But you admit that humans naturally excel in military-relevant capabilities that other species lack? I admit that humans evolved to survive in an environment that rewarded quick thinking, rapid adaptation, and the ability to turn disadvantages into advantages. Whether those traits are militarily relevant depends on your definition of warfare. Admiral Vexthane exchanged glances with his fellow officials before speaking again. Captain Chen, I'm going to be direct. Several member species are concerned that humanity represents a potential threat to galactic stability. Your performance here has only heightened those concerns. Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. This wasn't just a debriefing about her training results. It was a threat assessment of her entire species. The wrong answer here could have consequences that reached far beyond the Academy. Sir, she began carefully, may I ask what specific threats these species perceive? The threat of a species that excels at warfare claiming they desire only peace. Ambassador Yelkar snapped. The threat of natural-born predators, pretending to be harmless academics. The accusation hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah recognized it as a crucial moment, not just for herself, but for humanity's future relationship with the galactic community. Her response would likely be analyzed by intelligence services across the Federation and could influence policy decisions affecting billions of lives. She stood slowly, her movement causing several officials to tense involuntarily. Even knowing intellectually that she was unarmed and outnumbered, their instincts recognized the threat potential of a human warrior. You're absolutely right, she said simply. The admission sent a ripple of shock through the room. Several officials reached for communication devices, ready to alert their governments that their worst fears had been confirmed. Humans are natural predators, Sarah continued. We evolved to hunt, to fight, to survive in environments that would kill most other species. We're very good at warfare because we've been practicing it for millions of years. The tension in the room was palpable now. Every representative leaned forward, hanging on her words. But you're making a fundamental error in your threat assessment, Sarah said. You're assuming that being good at warfare means we want to engage in it. Let me explain why that's wrong. She activated the room's holographic display system, bringing up a three-dimensional map of Earth's surface. This is my homeworld as it exists today. Now, let me show you what it looked like 100 years ago. The display shifted, showing a planet scarred by radiation, industrial pollution, and the after-effects of global warfare. Vast regions glowed red, indicating areas contaminated by nuclear weapons or chemical warfare. Ocean levels had risen dramatically, drowning coastal cities. The contrast with modern Earth was stark. This is what happens when humans fight seriously, Sarah explained. We nearly destroyed our own planet because we were too good at warfare. The only thing that saved us was learning to be even better at peace. She gestured to the restored Earth image. Modern human civilization exists because we made a collective decision that our capabilities were too dangerous to use carelessly. We channeled our competitive instincts into science, art, exploration, and cooperation, instead of conquest. The room had fallen completely silent. Even Ambassador Yelkar looked stunned by the revelation. Every human child learns about the devastation wars in school, Sarah continued. Not as glorious history, but as a warning about what we're capable of when we stop controlling ourselves. We joined the Federation not to find new enemies to conquer, but to find new friends to protect. She turned to face Admiral Vexthane directly. Sir, you asked about humanity's intentions. Here they are. We want to help you defend the peace you've built, because we know better than anyone what happens when that peace fails. Dr. Mordain was the first to speak after a long silence. The psychological profiles make more sense now. Human cooperation levels are extremely high for a predator species. You've essentially domesticated yourselves. Not domesticated, Sarah corrected. Disciplined. We still have all our dangerous capabilities, We just choose not to use them unless absolutely necessary. And if that necessity arises? Admiral Vex Thane asked quietly. Sarah's expression hardened slightly. Then you'll discover why 12 Vorthak predators seemed like a minor challenge. The statement wasn't a threat. It was a simple statement of fact, delivered with the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly what they were capable of. The message was clear. Humans would prefer to live in peace. But anyone who mistook preference for inability would learn a very unpleasant lesson. General Koldash leaned back in his chair, his rocky features thoughtful. Captain, what would humanity require to feel secure in the Federation? The same thing every species requires, Sarah replied. Respect, fair treatment, and the knowledge that our friends will stand with us if we're threatened. And in return, humanity will do what it's always done best: adapt, innovate, and protect those who can't protect themselves. 3 days later, the graduation ceremony proceeded without incident. Sarah Chen received her commission as a Federation officer with the highest honors ever awarded to a first-year cadet. More importantly, the ceremony marked the announcement of several new joint initiatives between human military academies and Federation institutions. The official statement described these partnerships as cultural exchange programs designed to promote understanding and cooperation between species. What it didn't mention was that intelligence services throughout the galaxy were already analyzing human military doctrine, looking for ways to incorporate human tactical innovations into their own forces. The galaxy had learned that humans were far more formidable than anyone had imagined. But they had also learned that this formidable species preferred cooperation to conquest, mentorship to domination. It was a revelation that would reshape interstellar politics for generations to come. As Sarah's transport ship departed Kepler Station for the journey back to Earth, she reflected on what she had accomplished. Her mission had been to prove that humans could serve effectively alongside alien species. She had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, though not in the way she had originally planned. The Federation now knew what humanity was truly capable of. More importantly, they understood what humanity chose to do with those capabilities. It was a distinction that would define the relationship between humans and the galactic community for centuries to come. Back on Earth, military planners were already reviewing her reports and preparing for the next phase of human integration into galactic society. The Academy had been just the beginning. Soon, human officers would serve on Federation warships, human tacticians would advise alien generals, and human soldiers would stand guard over the peace they had all sworn to protect. The galaxy had gained more than just another member species. They had gained guardians who understood the true cost of warfare and were willing to pay any price to prevent it. And in quiet corners of the Federation, beings who had once viewed humans as harmless newcomers began to sleep better. Knowing that such protectors watched over their peaceful worlds, the small, unassuming woman with the non-lethal baton had changed everything with 12 carefully placed strikes. But her greatest victory wasn't defeating those predators in the arena. It was proving that the most dangerous predators in the galaxy had chosen to become something better.